Her stepmother forced her to go to river. They threw her into the cursed river to die, but she didn't just survive. She returned glowing with power, exposing secrets, breaking curses, and shaking the entire village. What the spirits did with her will leave you speechless. In the quiet village of Ekuru, everyone feared the river of Akunro. It was whispered that when the full moon hung directly above it, the cursed hour, strange things happened. People spoke of disappearances, of voices calling from the water, of shadows that moved on their own. No one ever dared to go there during that hour. But one girl had no choice. Ajani was a young girl known for her beauty and humble nature. Every morning before the sun rose, she swept the compound, fetched firewood, and washed clothes. She lived with her stepmother, Binafa, and stepsister Zala. While Ajani worked herself to exhaustion, Binafa and Zala lounged under the tree, laughing and mocking her. The villagers often watched quietly. Many remembered Ajani's late mother, a respected herbalist and healer, and saw the same gentle strength in the girl. As Ajani grew older, her beauty became more striking. Her skin glowed like fresh palm oil under the sun. Her eyes sparkled like the river before a storm. Men in the village began to talk. Some even came to their compound asking about her. This filled Binafa with rage. She couldn't stand the idea that a girl who wasn't her blood could outshine her own daughter. Jealousy burned in her chest every time someone praised Ajani. Zala, too, spoiled and proud, felt overshadowed by Ajani's quiet grace. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the compound, Binafa sat with Murafu, her husband and Ajani's father. Her voice was cold. "She's growing into a woman," she said sharply. "Men are coming here for her. Do something before she ruins everything. Get rid of her, or I will." Murafu, once a strong and proud man, had become weak under Binafa's control. Years of silence had broken his spirit. He stared at the ground, unable to meet her eyes, his voice lost in fear and guilt. He remembered Ajani's mother, how full of life she was, how she made their home a place of peace. But now that peace was long gone, that night, as Ajani lay on her mat, she overheard whispers outside. Binafa and Zala were planning something. She couldn't hear it all, but one word chilled her bones. "River!" She curled up tightly, her heart pounding. She knew something was coming, and it would not be good. The next morning, Binafa shouted her name. "Ajani, you must go to the river and fetch water. Now!" Ajani looked at the sky. The sun had just begun to rise, but Binafa interrupted her thoughts. "Not now. You will go when the moon is high. The day is too busy. Go tonight." Ajani's heart dropped. The cursed hour. She knew the stories. Everyone did. But she also knew what refusal meant. A beating, no food, or worse. She looked at her father for help. He looked away. With tears gathering in her eyes, Ajani nodded slowly. She would go, even if it meant facing the river's curse alone. Under the wide branches of the ancient Iroko tree, children gathered in a tight circle, their eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Elder Nwok sat in the center, his wrinkled face lit by the soft glow of the fire beside him. His voice was low, but powerful, each word sinking deep into the children's hearts. "Long ago," he began, his eyes scanning the crowd, "a woman dared to defy the river goddess of Ekunro. She stole sacred herbs meant only for the spirits and tried to use them for her selfish gain. The goddess, angered by the betrayal, cursed the river. Since then, whenever the full moon sits directly above the waters, the river becomes alive. It whispers, it tempts, and if anyone enters during that cursed hour, they vanish, forever taken by the goddess's wrath." The children gasped, some clinging to each other, others covering their ears. Even the wind seemed to hush as the story ended. The fire crackled, casting dancing shadows that looked like spirits moving around them. Elder Nwok leaned forward, his voice softer now. "The curse is real. That hour is not meant for the living. Never go to the river when the moon is full and high. No water is worth your life." Among the children sat Ajani, quiet as ever. Her eyes stayed on the flames, but her mind was far away. She had heard the story before. Everyone had. But tonight, the words felt different, stronger, like a warning meant just for her. She swallowed hard, remembering Binafa's command. She had to go to the river tonight, at the cursed hour. As the fire died down and the children were led away by their mothers, Ajani walked home slowly. The village was quiet. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. When she reached the compound, she saw Binafa standing at the doorway, arms crossed, watching her with a wicked smile. There was no pity in her eyes, only satisfaction. Her plan was working perfectly. Zala peeked from behind her mother, trying to hide her giggles. Ajani felt a coldness settle in her chest. She stepped inside without a word, her bare feet silent against the hard earth floor. She didn't need to ask. She knew what was expected of her. As she sat on her mat, staring at the ceiling, the old tale played over and over in her mind. The cursed woman, the angry goddess, the vanishing souls. She tried to shake off the fear, but it clung to her like smoke. Outside, the moon was rising, bright, full, climbing higher toward its deadly place above the river. Binafa passed her with a calabash in hand, dropping it in front of her with a thud. "Don't forget what you must do," she said coldly. "Fetch the water. The night won't wait for you." Ajani picked it up with trembling hands. Her heart was heavy, but her steps were steady. She would go, because she had no choice. The moon hung heavy in the sky, full and bright, casting an eerie silver glow over the village of Ekuru. Inside the dim compound, Binafa stood with arms folded, her face twisted in false concern. She shouted loud enough for the neighbors to hear. "Ajani, we're out of water. Go to the river. Now!" Ajani, sitting quietly in a corner, felt her heart stop. She looked at the clock made of shadows on the wall. Midnight was near. Her voice came out small, barely a whisper. "But it's almost midnight." Before she could finish, a sharp sting exploded across her cheek. Binafa had slapped her, hard. The clay cup beside Ajani fell and broke. "Are you calling me a liar?" Binafa hissed. "Do you want this household to die of thirst?" Zala's laugh echoed cruelly from the shadows. She didn't even try to hide it. To her, it was entertainment, a twisted game. Ajani held back tears and lowered her head. There was no room for argument, no one to defend her. She slowly stood up, picked up the empty clay pot, and stepped out into the night. The air outside was unnaturally still. Even the crickets had gone silent. No breeze, no rustling leaves. Just silence that pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloth. She walked carefully, the clay pot tucked under her arm, the earth cold beneath her feet. Each step toward the river felt longer than the last. The trees lining the path loomed like tall shadows, unmoving and watchful. Then came a sound, a faint whisper, not from any direction she could point to, but all around her. She stopped, her breath caught. It wasn't the wind. It sounded like her name, being called in a voice that wasn't human. She pressed forward, heart pounding, eyes darting from tree to tree. Then, just ahead, the river came into view, but it didn't look right. The water shimmered strangely, glowing with a pale, unnatural light, as if the moon had poured itself into it. Fog drifted along its surface, swirling in patterns like dancing spirits. Ajani froze. Every instinct in her body screamed to turn around, to run back, but she couldn't. She had to fetch the water or face Binafa's wrath again. Worse still, if she returned empty-handed, she might be forced to go back again, or punished even more harshly. She took one shaky step forward, then another, each one heavier than the last. Her fingers gripped the clay pot tightly. The whispers grew louder, still soft, but clearer now. Voices calling, humming, chanting in a language she didn't understand. The glowing water seemed to pulse, like it was alive. Ajani's breath came in short gasps. Her legs trembled, but she didn't stop. She reached the edge of the river and looked down at her reflection. What she saw made her stumble back. It wasn't her own face staring back at her. It was something else. Something watching her from beneath the water. Ajani stood at the riverbank, her hands trembling as she lowered the clay pot into the water. The surface was too still, like glass, and the moment the pot touched it, the calm shattered. A whirlpool formed out of nowhere, swirling fast, the glow of the moon dancing in its spirals. The water began to glow silver, lighting up the trees around her in a ghostly shimmer. She gasped and stumbled back, dropping the pot, which floated oddly instead of sinking. Then, from the heart of the whirlpool, something began to rise. Not water, not mist, but a glowing figure. It was a woman, but not just a woman. Her body flowed like water, her hair long and rippling like a river current, her eyes glowing like moonlight. She floated just above the water's surface, both terrifying and beautiful. Ajani couldn't move. She could barely breathe. The figure spoke, her voice like rushing water and thunder at the same time. "Why have you come, child? Do you seek death?" Ajani fell to her knees, her head bowed low. "Please, I didn't mean to disturb you. I was sent here. I didn't know." Her voice cracked with fear. "I meant no harm." The spirit stared at her, unblinking. Her eyes were deep, like they could see everything, every memory, every wound, every secret. Ajani felt exposed, like her soul had been opened. Then something shifted. The spirit's fierce gaze softened. "I see," she said slowly. "I see your pain, but I also see your heart. You are not meant to die tonight, Ajani." The spirit floated closer, her hand made of swirling water. Ajani wanted to step back, but she couldn't. She felt safe. And then the spirit touched her forehead. A flash of light exploded behind Ajani's eyes. Everything went silent. Her body became weightless. Her thoughts faded. Then, suddenly, darkness. Ajani fainted. Her body fell gently forward, not onto the cold ground, but into the glowing river itself. Yet she did not sink. The water closed over her, but not with cold or force. It held her like a cradle. And then, she vanished. No splash, no ripple. The river calmed again, glowing faintly under the moon. The broken pot floated quietly by the edge, untouched by the chaos that had just happened. Far away, deep beneath the surface, Ajani was being carried somewhere unknown, to a place no one in Ikuru had ever returned from. Not by death, but by destiny. Her journey had only just begun. By sunrise, Binafa stood in the center of the compound, wailing loudly and clutching her head as if grief had torn her apart. "Ajani is gone," she cried. "She left in the night like a thief. That girl has always been wild. She must have run off with some useless village boy. Shameful." Her cries were loud enough to wake half the village. Neighbors gathered, concerned and confused. Murafu stood beside her, silent and pale, his face heavy with guilt. He looked toward the forest path that led to the river, but he said nothing. Deep down, he knew Binafa had pushed Ajani too far, but fear held his tongue. The villagers whispered among themselves, some saddened, others shocked. Ajani was loved. Her kindness had touched many. A few nodded in agreement with Binafa's tale, but Woke narrowed his eyes. He didn't believe the girl had run away, not Ajani. Something was wrong. Zala, meanwhile, strutted around the compound in one of Ajani's favorite wrappers. She spun in front of a mirror, tossing her hair. "I look better in this than she ever did," she said, grinning at her reflection. But as soon as the words left her mouth, the mirror cracked down the middle. She jumped back, startled, but laughed it off. "It's old, just a coincidence." That same day, frogs began appearing inside Binafa's hut. Not one or two, but dozens, croaking loudly, hiding in corners, clinging to pots and mats. No matter how many they threw out, more returned the next hour. Binafa screamed in frustration, beating at them with brooms, but they always came back. Then, every night, just as the wind picked up, whispers began to fill the air, soft at first, then louder. "You will pay," the wind seemed to say. "She was innocent. You will pay." Zala began to wake up in sweat, swearing she saw shadows by the door, something brushing her skin in the dark. Her laughter faded. Her boldness turned into nervous glances. She stopped wearing Ajani's clothes, but it was too late. The spirits had noticed. And still, Binafa pretended everything was normal. "We are free now," she told Zala, forcing a smile. "No more useless girl around to steal the attention." But her voice was shaky. Each night she lay awake, the whispers getting closer, the frogs croaking louder, and the wind colder than ever before. Ajani's name was spoken softly by villagers now, with sadness, with guilt. Woke sat under the Iroko tree, staring toward the cursed river, muttering to himself, "The river does not take without a reason, and it never stays silent for long." And somewhere deep in the heart of the village, a feeling grew. Ajani was not truly gone. Something had awakened, and justice was coming. Ajani opened her eyes slowly, unsure if she was still alive. The air was soft and warm, filled with a glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. She was lying on a bed of soft moss beneath a sky made of rippling light. Around her, glowing trees shimmered with colors she had never seen before. Bright fish floated through the air like birds, and gentle music hummed from the ground. It was like a dream, but she knew it was real. A tall, majestic figure approached. Mama Oha, the river spirit. Her skin shimmered like water under moonlight, and her eyes held the calm of the deep. She smiled softly and said, "Welcome, Ajani. You are marked by the wicked, but chosen by the spirits. You are safe now, but your journey is just beginning." Ajani sat up, still confused. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because your heart is pure. Mama Oha said, "and because your pain has not hardened you, we have watched you, child. The river saw your tears." From that day, Ajani began her training in the realm beneath the river, a place where time moved differently, where years passed like months. Her teachers were not just spirits, but also the creatures of the realm, wise birds, gentle leopards, talking wind, and glowing trees that whispered secrets from ancient times. She learned to heal with plants. Her hands became magic in themselves, turning leaves into medicine, roots into life. Animals followed her, trusted her. She could hear their thoughts and speak their language. The wind became her friend, teaching her to read its direction, its warnings. Even silence spoke to her, and in that silence, she learned to hear lies and truth without words. Day by day, Ajani changed. Her fear faded, her eyes grew sharper, her spirit grew stronger. Her posture was like a queen's, though no crown sat on her head. Not yet. She moved with grace, spoke with wisdom, and carried a peace that came from knowing her purpose. Mama Oja watched with pride. One day, she called Ajani to the palace made of light, its walls like glass, its floors flowing like water. She placed a crown of river pearls on Ajani's head and said, "You are ready, my child. You are not just a girl. You are the river's chosen. And now, you must return." Ajani looked at her reflection in the water. She no longer saw the frightened girl who had stumbled into the cursed hour. She saw strength. She saw fire. She saw the spirit of a queen. And deep within her heart, she knew her time had come. Not for revenge, but for justice. Not for anger, but for truth. As the waters began to rise around her, lifting her gently, the world above called her name. Her story was not over. It had only just begun. In the quiet village of Ikuru, life carried on, though a shadow still lingered after Ajani's mysterious disappearance. One dusty afternoon, a stranger arrived. He wore simple clothes, his feet bare, and his face covered in travel dust. No one paid him much attention. He looked like a tired wanderer. His name was Tayo. What the villagers didn't know was that he was no ordinary traveler. Tayo was the hidden crown prince of the neighboring kingdom, sent by his father to learn the ways of the people and choose a bride worthy not of wealth, but of heart. Tayo settled into village life easily. He helped old men in the fields, fetched water for the women, and listened more than he spoke. He never revealed who he truly was. Instead, he chose to understand the people through their stories. And every road in Ikuru seemed to lead back to one name, Ajani. One day, while helping at the village square, Tayo sat beside Asoi, the local gossip who always had something to say. She leaned close and whispered, "There used to be a girl here, Ajani, too beautiful for her own good. Her stepmother hated her, that Binafa woman. Then one full moon night, she just vanished. Some say she ran away, some say the river took her." Tayo's interest grew. He began observing Binafa's household from a distance. Something didn't sit right. One evening, he saw a girl laughing loudly outside the hut. It was Zala. Around her neck was a delicate necklace, handcrafted with river stones and tiny silver beads. It didn't match her. It didn't belong. Tayo approached her casually. "That's a beautiful necklace," he said with a warm smile. Zala twirled it between her fingers. "Thank you," she said, tossing her hair. "It's mine." "Really?" Tayo asked gently. "Where did you get it?" Zala hesitated, then replied, "It was a gift from a friend long ago." Tayo nodded politely, but his mind turned sharply. He had seen that exact necklace in Asoyi's story, described as Ajani's favorite, a piece she never removed. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. From that moment, Tayo began watching more closely. He noticed how the villagers still lowered their voices when passing Binafa's house, how mirrors in her home were always covered. He listened to the whispers in the marketplace. At night, strange things stirred. Shadows, wind, even the animals acted uneasy. Tayo, though kind and soft-spoken, had the instincts of a ruler, and he knew when a village carried secrets. The more he listened, the clearer it became. Ajani hadn't run away. She hadn't vanished by choice. Something terrible had happened, and Binafa's smile was too polished, her sorrow too rehearsed. As Tayo continued to blend in with the villagers, he vowed silently he would find the truth. Whoever hurt Ajani would face justice, and the river, silent but watching, seemed to stir, as if it too was waiting. Dark clouds gathered above Ikuru one strange evening, casting shadows across the village. The air was thick and heavy. Chickens hid, goats bleated nervously, and even the trees seemed to tremble. Suddenly, thunder cracked through the sky, and the wind howled louder than ever. Villagers rushed out of their homes, eyes wide with fear as they looked toward the river. Something was happening, something not of this world. The river Ekunro, usually calm and quiet, began to churn. Its waters rose, spilling over the banks, flooding the fields, and creeping toward the village like it had come alive. Lightning lit the sky, and then, from the thick mist that had settled above the river, a figure began to appear. Step by step, she walked forward, as though the storm itself made way for her. She wore a gown spun from flowing river silk, glowing like the moonlight. Her skin shimmered with droplets that never dried. Her long braided hair carried tiny pearls like stars, and her eyes, deep, powerful, and glowing, held stories untold. Gasps spread through the crowd, mouths fell open. Some people whispered, others dropped to their knees. It was her. Ajani had returned, the girl they thought lost, the girl they mourned, the girl Binafa said ran away. But she was no longer just a girl. She had returned as something greater, something stronger. She stood tall and calm, untouched by the storm swirling around her. Binafa pushed through the crowd. When her eyes landed on Ajani, her face went pale. She screamed, her voice cracking. Witch! Ghost! Zala, watching from behind her, clutched her stolen necklace and fainted on the spot. But Ajani didn't shout. She didn't raise a hand. Her voice was soft, but every word struck like thunder. I have returned, she said, her eyes on Binafa, and the spirits have seen everything. The ground beneath them shook, as if the earth itself agreed. The villagers stepped back in fear and awe. From the heart of the river, a powerful voice echoed through the skies, calm, but full of warning. Judgment begins. It was Mama Oja, the river spirit. Her voice rolled across the village like a wave, shaking roofs, breaking clay pots, and causing birds to fly in terror. The storm roared louder, but Ajani stood firm. Her return was no accident. She had come back not for revenge, but for truth, for justice, for balance. Binafa fell to her knees, sobbing, trembling. The villagers slowly turned to her, eyes filled with suspicion, fear, and anger. The lies she had built for years were crashing down like the rain above them. Ajani's presence changed the air. Children who had never met her before reached for her dress. Elders bowed their heads. The storm did not touch her. The wind danced around her like a protector. She had become more than they ever imagined. And as the river calmed and the sky began to clear, one thing was certain. Nothing in Ekuru would ever be the same again. The entire village of Ekuru gathered in the square. No one wanted to miss what would happen next. Children clung to their mothers, elders leaned on their staffs, and whispers ran through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. All eyes were on Ajani, who stood calmly at the center, glowing like the moon after a storm. She looked straight at Binafa. With one gentle touch on her shoulder, a swirl of smoke rose into the air. The villagers gasped. The smoke shifted into clear visions, like living memories. They saw Binafa striking Ajani, poisoning her food, tearing her clothes. They saw her dragging her to the river, whispering curses, and leaving her to die. The crowd gasped in horror. Some turned away in shame, remembering how they believed Binafa's lies. Binafa fell to her knees, trembling, her face pale with fear. Please, I was afraid. I was jealous. Forgive me, she begged, tears running down her cheeks. But it was too late. The air shifted again. Mama Oha's voice echoed above them, deep and final. Binafa, your lies are ended. From now on, your mouth shall only speak truth, and your hands shall serve those you once scorned. A soft blue light wrapped around Binafa. When she tried to speak, only truths came out. No matter how hard she tried to twist them, she sobbed as villagers turned away from her, the same people she used to mock and control. Then Ajani turned to Zala. The girl who once called herself the most beautiful now looked confused. She touched her hair. It fell limp. She touched her skin. It had dulled. Her glow was gone. She screamed, but her voice cracked with shame. Her vanity had turned to ash. Murafu, standing at the back, stepped forward slowly, tears already falling from his eyes. Ajani, he whispered, I was weak. I failed you. I should have protected you. I'm sorry. Ajani looked at him for a long moment. Pain flashed in her eyes, but she said nothing. She turned and walked away. That silence hurt more than any word could. Then, from the crowd, a voice spoke firmly. I have seen your strength. I have seen your truth. Ajani turned. It was the quiet stranger who had been helping in the village. But now, he stood tall and proud. He removed the dusty cloak, wiped the mud from his face, and the villagers gasped again. He wasn't just a traveler. "I am Prince Tayo," he declared, his voice clear and royal, "and I wish to make you my queen." The villagers stood still, stunned by the truth. Ajani, once thrown away like nothing, now stood before a prince, strong, powerful, and glowing with honor. She didn't answer right away. She simply looked into his eyes. The village waited, holding its breath. A breeze blew gently, as if the river itself listened. Justice had spoken. The truth had risen. And Ajani, the girl who had been left to die, now held the future in her hands. Months passed, and the village of Akuru transformed. Word spread like wildfire. The girl who vanished into the river had not only returned, but had become a queen. The once quiet village prepared for a wedding like no other. Every hut was decorated, every drum polished, and songs were sung from morning till night. The air buzzed with excitement. For the first time in years, joy overflowed like the river in rainy season. On the day of the royal wedding, the sun rose with golden light, as if the skies themselves celebrated. People from near and far gathered in Akuru. Chiefs, elders, and villagers filled the great square, waiting to witness a moment that would be remembered for generations. Then she appeared, Queen Ajani of Ekunro and Akimba. Her gown shimmered like water at sunrise, woven by unseen hands from river silk and stardust. Every thread whispered of her journey, her pain, her strength. Her crown, made of river pearls and blessed by Mama Oja herself, sparkled with quiet power. As she walked down the path, all eyes followed her in awe. Tayo, the prince who had seen her truth, stood tall beside her, dressed in royal robes that carried his kingdom's history. But his eyes stayed only on Ajani, full of pride and love. Far in the shadows, near the old riverbank, Mama Oja watched. She did not come forward, but her presence was felt. The wind whispered her name. Flowers near the river bloomed brighter. She smiled, knowing the girl she had once saved was now a queen, not just of a palace, but of the people's hearts. After the wedding, Ajani did not live like a typical queen. She built schools with her own hands, places where girls and boys could learn without fear. She taught the power of knowledge, of kindness, of standing up for what is right. She invited widows, outcasts, and forgotten women to the palace, giving them work, dignity, and voice. She healed with herbs, with words, with her presence. Under her rule, Akuru and Akimba became stronger, wiser, and kinder. The cursed hour, the moment just before midnight, when she was once thrown into the river, was renamed the Hour of Hope. Bells rang every night at that time, not to mourn, but to remind people that even from the darkest moments, light could rise. No one forgot how it all began, how a young girl was nearly destroyed by jealousy and cruelty, how she was saved by a spirit, how she rose, stronger than ever. Her story lived in lullabies, in folk songs, in fireside tales told by elders to wide-eyed children. And as the stars lit the sky above the kingdom, the voice of the narrator echoed one last time. She was thrown to the river at the cursed hour, but she returned as a blessing the world would never forget. If this story touched your heart, if Ajani's strength reminded you that even in our darkest moments, there is still hope, then remember this. No matter what others try to do to destroy your spirit, the universe always finds a way to lift those who walk with truth, kindness, and courage. Ajani was thrown into the river not to die, but to rise. Just like her, you too can rise from pain, from betrayal, from silence, and become something greater. Let this story be your reminder that even when no one believes in you, even when your voice is unheard, there is still a power inside you that the world cannot break. Maybe you know someone who's been pushed aside, someone who needs to hear this tale of strength, of justice, of transformation. Don't let their story end in sorrow. Share this video with them. Remind them that they matter, that they can rise, just like Ajani. If this story moved you, please like this video. It shows us that these stories still matter in today's world. Share it with your friends, your family, your community. Let Ajani's journey inspire others. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more powerful African stories that speak to the soul. Thank you for watching, for feeling, for remembering. Because together, when we listen to stories like this, we keep the spirit of truth, justice, and hope alive.